This video is sponsored by PureVPN.
And the product genius that brought them to that monopolistic position gets rotted out by people running these companies who have no conception of a good product versus a bad product. And they really have no feeling in their hearts, usually, about wanting to really help the customers.
This is the iPhone XS, and as Apple's latest and greatest iPhone, you would expect nothing short from perfect from this device. Sadly, it just doesn't deliver. So the iPhone XS has been my daily driver now for exactly 1 week and a half, and in that time, I've had a pretty mixed bag of results from the software and the hardware combined. But if there's one way I'd describe my experience with this phone, it'd probably be just a little bit lackluster. Now, I've come to this phone having never actually used an iPhone daily without any other phone in my pocket. Sure, I've made videos on iPhones in the past, but through most of those I have my regular daily driver, so this has really been a new experience for me. And whilst the phone has been pretty disappointing through most of my use, there are actually some pretty decent parts about it, and one of those is the design. This phone has just a sleek, minimalistic design. It's made of all glass and metal, and it is pretty simple, but it works. The stainless steel edges aren't the most convenient things to have, as they do scratch and gather fingerprints way too easily, but you definitely can't deny this looks amazing, even if it does scratch easily. In fact, most if not all of the design we see here is from the original iPhone X, with the only minor changes here being to the camera size and the speaker grills. But that's what we can expect from an S-style upgrade, nothing too big. The buttons on this phone are stereotypical iPhone. They're clicky, they have great tactile feedback, and they just feel great in general. But I find myself taking unnecessary screenshots with this device whenever I try and press the button with one hand. If the volume buttons were just a little bit lower or even just a little bit less easy to press, it would be completely fine. It might just be me, but I have more screenshots in my photo library than I do photos from the camera. Around the front we have a 5.8-inch notched display, and I'm really a bit unsure about whether or not this is actually all that good. I really like the minimal bezels all around, but the color accuracy doesn't really look all that good at all, with oversaturation being a big issue, at least for me. It appears most in photos that are being taken on the phone itself or in video playback, but either way, at times the screen just looks terrible. Viewing angles on the regular size XS are actually really great, and there's only a slight blue shift when off axis. But this is common on any type of OLED panel. And the notch isn't as noticeable anymore as it was when I first picked up the phone, but it's definitely still there, and I'm still not a fan. But apart from those two things, the screen can actually be really great. It's got a good resolution, it gets very bright, and most of the time it just looks great in general. Face ID is finally fast enough that I really like not having a fingerprint scanner on a phone, and this is one of the major differences in this device from last year, or at least the only one that is actually a significant change. In terms of internal hardware changes, all that's new here is the A12 processor along with 4 gigs of RAM, so not that much has changed at all. But when you pair this new CPU with iOS 12, the performance is actually amazing. Through multitasking games or having all of my apps open, this phone can take it all, and this is down to that new optimization in iOS 12 that's actually improved any of the supported devices. iOS is known for its popularity as an operating system, but I've always been an Android user, at least for my daily drivers, so the full switch to iOS has given me a couple of mixed opinions. On the one hand, I really like how smooth everything is, from transitions between apps to the use of haptics as a form of feedback on the device. Everything feels really well-rounded and refined, and actually just really well thought out in general. But at the same time, everything feels like it only has one way to be used, and if that is the case, then it makes last year's iPhone X a better option for price to return. But the biggest reason why iOS feels a lot better than Android does is because of its developers. There's only a few different devices iOS runs on, so 9 times out of 10, the apps that are developed for it feel much more well-rounded than they do anywhere else. And that is a huge deal here. In fact, I find that Google apps are often better on iOS than they are on Android. There's more animations, there's smoother feeling transitions, and overall it feels like it's designed around the device instead of made for every device out there. And that is everything that's wrong with Android at this point in time. Gestures are implemented really well within iOS 12, with swiping being the new way into and out of apps. Although there's nothing new from last year, that is probably a good thing. After all, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. In fact, the software experience is probably the best part about this phone. It's the little things that iOS 12 gives you, like screen time, which just lets you know how much you're using your phone and gives you the ability to schedule downtime. It's one of those things that Apple's put in to try and give you a little bit of self-love. I understand why people love iOS so much. It's minimalistic, but it also just has a simple and intuitive experience. But unfortunately, what I can't get used to is the limits that iOS has. Now, don't get me wrong, I really do like iOS and everything it has to offer, but I just prefer Android for its customization. And even though apps may not be built as well, it's still my favorite. In the first couple of days of my use with this phone, I did notice a couple of glitches, but since then they've all kind of been ironed out, except this one glitch in the Contacts app. All other UI errors I experienced have disappeared pretty quickly. And the biggest thing that bugs me about iOS is the logos up in the top corner. Over on the left, it looks great, but on the right, it looks a bit crammed in, like they've all just been shoved into the corner pretty badly. I'd love to be able to customize this even just a little. But apart from that, there's not really much else I can say about the software experience on this phone. I'd like to say that the software experience is unmatched, but actually it's exactly the same as last year's iPhone. And this is where things start to degrade a little bit. These are the cameras. So the cameras on this phone are actually really bad, as you can probably tell from my camera comparison with the Pixel 2 XL. Most, if not all of the photos from the XS, to put it lightly, are just awful by comparison. There are two 12-megapixel sensors on this phone, one with a 28mm lens and the other with a 56mm lens. And whilst the photos aren't terrible all of the time, they're still nowhere near what I've been used to from the Pixel 2. Saturation and colour accuracy is actually off quite a lot with this phone. There's some clear over-sharpening going on, and the colour balance and skin tones are also just a bit weird. The secondary camera that's supposedly 2x zoom looks more like a digital crop than it does a telephoto lens, and the details just aren't there for the secondary camera. And the portrait mode definitely isn't something I'm a fan of either. This is mainly because the object separation is a bit too aggressive in deciding what's kept and what's blurred out. It is cool that you can change the virtual aperture afterwards, but this won't always be that useful if it can't select the right objects to keep in focus. But the biggest thing that I've noticed is that taking photos of a subject with the sky, it actually comes out really oversaturated, or the colour of the sky is just unnatural. For a phone that is £1,000, I expected so much more from the cameras than this poor quality, inaccurate looking set of cameras. If you're switching from an iPhone X, it's more of a downgrade than it is an upgrade in terms of cameras. But having said that, the video quality does look pretty good from the iPhone XS, and it's probably the best thing that these cameras can do. It's stable, it's good enough quality, and most of all, it's 4K at 60 frames a second, which is actually really great to see on a phone. And the battery life on this phone is okay, but I find that I need low power mode most of the time to get through a full day of use whilst I'm in school. That is a little bit disappointing, and I'm getting about 4.5 hours out of the screen time on this phone, which is just about average. There is a lot of good stuff here on this phone, but my problem with this device is that there is not enough new, good features that justify that £1,000 price tag, when you can get an original iPhone X for £600 to £700 these days. It's totally not worth the upgrade, but if you're coming from an older generation device, and you can't handle anything less than the latest device they offer, then I guess this would be a significant change. But for me, coming from the Pixel 2 XL, I'll be honest with you, I cannot wait to switch back. And this is because of all the issues that the phone has, from charging to signal connectivity and the cameras, all of these issues being discovered. And that's what makes me think this is the worst phone Apple has ever made. I've never seen an iPhone with this many issues within the first week of it being released. It's unacceptable, especially for the price tag. So for anyone who wants a new iPhone that looks good, has a good battery life, good cameras, and works just overall in general, this is not the iPhone for you. But maybe the iPhone X is. VPN is an easy way to keep all of your browsing data secure on all of your devices. With over 2,000 VPN servers designed to meet any purpose, from unblocking Netflix to getting the best security possible, PureVPN offers top-notch protection with great pricing. Check it out at the link in the video description below.